The sky above Velthar Prime burned orange and red as another hive ship entered the atmosphere. Elder Phylaxis watched from the council tower, his three-fingered hands trembling against the observation window. Below, millions of his people fled toward the underground shelters. They had maybe 6 hours before the Vrathan swarm consumed everything on the surface. "Elder, the second world has gone silent," said Scout Tyrinna, her voice breaking. She was young, barely into her 20th cycle, and her silver skin had turned pale with fear. "The sensors show no life signs, nothing. They ate everything." Phylaxis closed his 4 eyes. 2 worlds gone. 2 beautiful garden worlds where the Quilnari had lived in peace for 10,000 years, now gray and dead. The swarm had appeared 6 months ago, and nothing the Quilnari tried could stop them. Their ships were faster, their weapons stronger, their hunger endless. "Activate the beacon," Phylaxis said quietly. Tyrinna looked at him with shock. "Elder, the precursor beacon? But we don't know what it does. We don't know who will answer." "Does it matter?" Phylaxis gestured to the burning sky. "In 6 hours there will be no one left to care. Activate it." The beacon was ancient, left behind by a race that vanished 1,000,000 years ago. It sat in a vault beneath the council tower, covered in symbols no one could read. But the Quilnari scientists believed it was a distress signal, designed to reach across impossible distances. Tyrinna entered the vault with shaking hands and pressed the activation panel. The beacon hummed to life, singing a song into the darkness between stars. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of desperate fighting as the Quilnari fell back, shelter by shelter, city by city. The swarm was patient. They didn't need to hurry. Their prey had nowhere to run. Then on the morning of the 22nd day, Tyrinna's sensors picked up something impossible. "Elder, there's a ship. It just appeared at the system's edge. It's not swarm, it's not anything in our database." Phylaxis rushed to her station. On the screen, a vessel hung in space. It was small compared to swarm hive ships, sleek and gray with strange markings on its hull. The design was unlike anything the Quilnari had ever seen. Angular, aggressive, built by someone who expected to fight. "Broadcast all frequencies," Phylaxis ordered. "Tell them we're here. Tell them we need help." The response came in a language they didn't know, processed through translation algorithms that struggled with the syntax. When the message finally played clearly, everyone in the control room fell silent. "This is Captain Hyunwoo of the Earth vessel Taejong. We received your distress signal. What is your situation?" "Earth." The translation computers found no reference to such a place in any galactic database. These were strangers from beyond known space. Phylaxis keyed his communicator with desperate hope. "This is Elder Phylaxis of the Quilnari people. We are under attack by the Vrathan swarm. They have consumed 2 of our 3 worlds. We have perhaps 3 days before this world falls. We are a peaceful species. We have no weapons that can stop them. Please, if you have any mercy, help us." The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Then the human captain spoke again. "Stand by. We're moving closer to assess the situation." The Taejong glided through the system, and Phylaxis ordered all remaining defense satellites to stand down. The ship moved with purpose, scanning the dead worlds and the massive swarm fleet in orbit. There were hundreds of swarm vessels. The humans had 1 ship. When the Taejong finally established visual communication, Phylaxis gasped. The creature on the screen stood upright like a Quilnari, but that's where the similarity ended. It was tall, perhaps twice his height, with dark hair and smooth tan skin. But the eyes looked forward like a predator's eyes. Every herbivore species in the galaxy had eyes on the sides of their head to watch for danger. These beings had eyes that tracked prey. "I'm Captain Hyunwoo," the human said. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, taking in everything. "My crew and I were on an exploration mission when we detected your beacon. We've reviewed the data on the swarm forces. I won't lie to you, Elder. They outnumber us significantly." Phylaxis felt his hope crumbling. "Then you cannot help us." Something changed in the human's expression. His mouth curved upward in what the translator identified as a smile, but it didn't look friendly. "It looked dangerous, I didn't say that. My officers and I need to discuss tactics. Give us 1 hour." The communication ended. Phylaxis slumped in his chair while Tyrinna paced nervously. Around them, the control room staff whispered in worried voices. They had pinned their last hope on strangers who might simply run away. Exactly 1 hour later, Hyunwoo called back. This time, other humans stood behind him. A female with sharp eyes wearing what looked like tactical gear. A male with tools strapped to his belt and grease on his hands. A smaller female holding a data tablet and watching the Quilnari with intense curiosity. Elder Phylaxis, Hyunwoo began. My second officer, Ara, has analyzed the swarm's attack patterns. My engineer, Taemin, believes he can develop countermeasures. My xenobiologist, Nari, wants to study swarm biology to find weaknesses. We've decided to help you. Phylaxis couldn't speak, couldn't process what he was hearing. But understand this, Hyunwoo continued, his voice growing harder. We're going to fight them in ways you might find disturbing. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day. We learned to fight back. Some of our methods won't be pretty. I don't understand, Phylaxis managed to say. You're one ship against hundreds. This is suicide. The human named Ara leaned into view, and her smile was even more frightening than Hyunwoo's. Maybe. But we've got a few tricks they won't expect. Captain, should we tell them? Hyunwoo nodded. Elder, what classification is your homeworld? Environmental danger scale? We are a Class 3 garden world, Phylaxis said. Peaceful weather, abundant food, no major predators. Why? The humans exchanged glances. Nari spoke up, her voice gentle but her words chilling. Earth is rated as a Class 12 death world, Elder. The weather tries to kill us. The animals try to kill us. The plants try to kill us. Even the air can kill us if we're not careful. We evolved to survive the unsurvivable. These swarm creatures? They're just another threat. Taemin grinned, and Phylaxis noticed the humans' teeth were flat in front but sharp at the corners. Omnivore teeth. Teeth that could eat meat. We've been looking at their hive ships. Their armor is biological. Their weapons are chemical. Everything about them is organic. That makes them vulnerable to things they've never encountered. We'll need complete data on the swarm, Era said, already working on her tablet. Attack patterns, breeding cycles, communication methods, everything you have. And we'll need you to trust us even when our tactics seem crazy. Phylaxis looked at these strange predators from an impossible world. He thought about his people hiding in shelters. He thought about the two dead worlds. He thought about how the Quilnari had prayed to the ancient beacon for salvation. Perhaps they should have been more specific about what kind of salvation they wanted. What do you need from us? He asked. Hyunwoo's expression softened slightly. Right now? Just don't surrender. Hold on for 3 more days. We'll handle the rest. The communication ended, and Phylaxis watched through the observation window as the small human ship moved toward the massive swarm fleet. It looked like an insect approaching a herd of beasts, but somewhere in his chest, beneath the fear and desperation, Phylaxis felt something he hadn't felt in months. He felt hope. Commander Braytok had led the Quilnari Defense Forces for 30 years. He had managed border disputes and natural disasters. He had coordinated rescue operations and emergency responses. But he had never seen war like this, and he had certainly never worked with anyone like the humans. He stood in the command center watching the tactical display, where Ara explained her battle plan to a room full of shocked Quilnari officers. The human woman pointed at the holographic map with casual confidence that bordered on madness. The swarm hive ships are massive but slow. They rely on swarm fighters for defense, so we'll use the debris field from the second world as cover. The Taijong will draw their attention while small Quilnari craft plant explosives on the hive ship's underbelly. That's suicide, Braytok said flatly. The radiation in that debris field will cook anyone who enters it. Ara looked at him with those predator eyes. Not humans. Our shielding can handle it. We'll lead the attack run. Taemin, the engineer, pulled up another display. We've also analyzed their biological armor. It's impressive, but it has a weakness. It responds to heat changes. So we're going to make their own armor work against them. How? Asked a Quilnari science officer. Frozen hydrogen bombs. We coat their ships in supercooled material. Their armor contracts and cracks, then we hit them with plasma fire. The thermal shock will tear them apart. The Quilnari officers looked at each other with mounting horror. These tactics were brutal, destructive, and showed a complete disregard for conventional combat doctrine. Braytok was about to protest when Hyunwoo entered the room. The human captain carried himself with quiet authority. He wasn't the biggest being in the room, but somehow he commanded attention just by walking in. He studied the tactical map for a moment, then nodded. Good plan, Ara. When do we start? 30 minutes. I've already briefed the Marine teams. Marine teams? Braytok interrupted. What Marine teams? Hyunwoo looked at him calmly. Commander, we need to board one of their hive ships and capture swarm specimens. My Marines will handle it, Braytok felt his skin turn cold. You're going to board a swarm hive ship? Captain, nothing survives inside those vessels. They're filled with parasites, acid, biological weapons. It's certain death. A new human entered the room and Braytok took an involuntary step back. This one was even bigger than Hyunwoo. With massive shoulders and arms covered in scars, he wore black armor and carried weapons that looked designed to destroy walls. Commander Do-hyun, Hyunwoo introduced him. He leads our Marine Division. Do-hyun, this is Commander Braytok of the Quilnari Defense Forces. Do-hyun nodded respectfully, but his eyes never stopped scanning the room, identifying threats and exits. A warrior's instinct. Commander, my team is ready to breach the hive ship. We've studied the layout. 12 Marines, full combat gear, 40-minute operation. In and out. 12? Braytok couldn't believe what he was hearing. 12 Marines against thousands of swarm creatures? Do-hyun smiled, and it was the most frightening expression Braytok had ever seen. We don't need more. Swarm drones are individually weak. They rely on numbers and fear. Take away the fear, and they're just targets. Over the next hour, Braytok watched the humans prepare for battle. It was like observing a completely different species of being. They moved with efficiency and purpose, checking weapons and equipment with practiced ease. They joked with each other, laughed even, as if they were preparing for a training exercise instead of a suicide mission. He watched Do-hyun brief his Marines in the hangar bay. The soldiers listened intently as their commander outlined the mission parameters. When he finished, one of them raised a hand. Sir, what's our casualty estimate? Do-hyun considered for a moment. Honestly, 3 wounded, maybe 1 critical. The narrow corridors will limit how many they can throw at us at once. Stick to your training and watch your corners. The Marines nodded like this was acceptable, like walking into a hive of biological horrors with an expectation of getting wounded was just part of the job. A young female pilot named Mireille performed pre-flight checks on her interceptor craft. Braytok watched her work, noting the speed and precision of her movements. Her ship was smaller and faster than anything the Quilnari had built, with engines that burned hot enough to melt standard hull plating. Pilot Mireille, he called out, your flight plan shows you'll be pulling gravitational forces that exceed Quilnari safety limits by 400%. She looked up and grinned. Yeah, it's going to be rough, but my bird can handle it. I'm not worried about your ship. Can you handle it? Mireille laughed. Commander, I grew up on Earth. Our training included 8G maneuvers in atmosphere. This is actually lighter than what I'm used to. Braytok tried to imagine pulling 8 times his body weight in gravity and felt dizzy. These beings were built differently, literally built for environments that would crush his people. The battle began exactly 30 minutes later, as Ara had promised. Braytok watched from the command center as the Taejong accelerated toward the swarm fleet at speeds that made his people's ships look like floating stations. Swarm fighters swarmed out to meet it, thousands of them forming a living cloud of teeth and weapons. The human ship didn't slow down. It dove straight into the swarm. They're going to be overwhelmed, a Quilnari officer whispered. Then the Taejong opened fire. Its weapons weren't the clean energy beams the Quilnari used. They were kinetic rounds, explosive missiles and plasma fire that tore through swarm fighters like they were made of paper. The human ship spun and rolled through the enemy formation, its weapons tracking targets faster than Braytok could follow. Mireille's interceptor followed close behind, her small craft dancing between swarm fighters with impossible precision. She flew through gaps that shouldn't exist, rolled under enemy fire and returned shots that never missed. She wasn't just flying. She was hunting. They're insane, breathed the tactical officer beside Braytok. No, Braytok said slowly, watching the Taejong deliberately ram a swarm fighter that got too close. There's something else. Something we've never seen before. In the debris field, Do-hyun's boarding craft attached to a hive ship's hull like a parasite. Braytok accessed the marine helmet cameras and immediately regretted it. The interior of the hive ship was a nightmare of organic walls, dripping acid, and swarm creatures that looked like someone's worst dream. The Marines moved through it like they were walking through a garden. Their weapons fired in controlled bursts. They communicated in short, efficient phrases. When a swarm drone dropped from the ceiling onto one Marine, he simply grabbed it and threw it into a wall hard enough to crack chitin, then kept moving. Contact front. Do-hyun's voice came through calm and steady, switching to breaching charges. Nari, we're approaching what looks like a biostorage chamber. Get ready to catalog samples. Nari's voice responded, equally calm despite the chaos. Ready? Remember, I need specimens that are as intact as possible. We'll try not to break your bugs too badly. Braytok watched as the Marines fought their way deeper into the hive ship. One took a spray of acid across his armor and kept fighting. Another got grabbed by a swarm warrior twice her size, broke free, and put 3 rounds through its center mass. They moved like they had done this 1,000 times before. Because Braytok realized with growing understanding they probably had. Maybe not against the swarm specifically, but against something equally dangerous. On their world. On Earth. When the Marines extracted 20 minutes later with their samples, Braytok did a quick count. All 12 were alive. 2 were wounded, 1 seriously. Exactly as Do-hyun had predicted. The frozen hydrogen attack came next. Quilnari ships dropped the supercooled bombs that Taemin had designed. The swarm hive ship's biological armor contracted violently, and cracks spiderwebbed across their hulls. Then Ara gave the order, and plasma fire poured into the cracks. 2 hive ships broke apart, venting atmosphere and swarm creatures into space. In the command center, the Quilnari officers stood in stunned silence. They had been fighting the swarm for 6 months and barely scratched them. The humans had been here for 6 hours and had destroyed 2 hive ships. Hyunwoo's voice came through the communication channel. Commander Braytok, we've cleared a section of orbit. Move your civilian transports to the safe zone. We'll hold this position. Braytok found his voice. Captain, what you're doing is impossible. No one fights like this. There was a pause. When Hyunwoo spoke again, his voice was quiet, but it carried weight. Commander, on Earth we have a saying. The difficult we do immediately. The impossible takes a little longer. Get your people to safety. We're not done yet. Braytok began issuing evacuation orders, but his mind was reeling. The galaxy had always assumed that advanced civilizations were peaceful, that war was a sign of primitiveness. The Quilnari believed that violence was something intelligent species evolved beyond. But watching these humans fight, Braytok understood a terrible truth. Some species didn't evolve beyond violence. Some species perfected it. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the galaxy needed right now. The swarm overmind had consumed 300 worlds across 50 systems. It had faced resistance from dozens of species. Some fought with weapons. Some tried to negotiate. Some simply fled. All of them eventually became food. These new creatures were different. The overmind studied the battlefield through 1,000 eyes on 100 ships. It analyzed the patterns of the single small vessel that had destroyed 4 hive ships in 2 days. It processed the data from drones that encountered the boarding parties. Something in its vast biological neural network registered a sensation it had never experienced before. Uncertainty. These beings from Earth didn't behave like prey. They hunted. On the Taejong, Nari worked in the medical bay that had been converted into a laboratory. She wore full protective gear as she studied the swarm specimens that Do-hyun's Marines had captured. Around her, vials and containers held samples of everything from swarm parasites to fragments of hive ship armor. This is fascinating and horrible, she muttered, examining a parasite under her microscope. Their entire biology is built around consumption and reproduction. No art, no culture, just hunger. Taemin entered the lab, carefully avoiding the specimens. Please tell me you found something we can use. Nari pulled up her findings on the main display. Yes, actually. Their communication system is entirely pheromone-based. They use chemical signals to coordinate attacks. If we can disrupt those signals, their swarm tactics will fall apart. How do we disrupt them? Nari smiled, and there was something predatory in that smile that would have terrified the Quilnari. We introduce foreign pheromones. Confusion signals. I've been analyzing Earth bacteria and fungi from our biostorage. Several of them produce compounds that should cause chaos in their communication network. Taemin nodded slowly. Biological warfare. The Quilnari won't like it. The Quilnari are alive because we're willing to do things they won't. Besides, it's just bacteria. Earth bacteria that the swarm has never encountered. In the medical section, Jisoo treated the wounded Marines from the last boarding action. She was small compared to the soldiers, but she worked with absolute confidence. The Marine on her table had taken acid burns across his back. Burns that should have eaten through skin and muscle. Instead, the damage was superficial, already healing. You're lucky, she told him while applying synthetic skin. Another 2 seconds and this would have reached bone. The Marine grinned through his pain medication. Doc, luck is for people who don't train. That was all skill. Jisoo rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. Right. Skill at getting hurt. Hold still. As she worked, her mind wandered to something she had discovered while treating swarm parasite exposure. A Quilnari officer had been infected during an attack. The parasite should have taken over his nervous system within minutes. Jisoo had watched in horror, prepared to euthanize him before he turned. But then she remembered the reports from the Marines. Several of them had been exposed to parasites during boarding actions. None had turned. She ran the tests and found the answer. The human immune system was so aggressive, so overwhelming, that swarm parasites died within seconds of entering human tissue. The same immune system that fought off Earth's millions of diseases treated swarm parasites like common bacteria and destroyed them. She had shared her findings with Hyun-woo, who looked thoughtful for a long moment before saying, "Don't tell the Quilnari yet. If the swarm learns we're immune, they might adapt. Let's keep this advantage quiet." On the bridge, Ara studied the tactical display with Hyun-woo. The swarm had pulled back after losing 6 hive ships, but they were regrouping. Intelligence showed they were bringing in reinforcements from the other systems. "They're learning from us," Ara said. "They're adapting their tactics, staying at longer range, using more coordinated attacks. Then we adapt faster," Hyun-woo replied. "What else can we throw at them?" Taemin has an idea that's either brilliant or insane. He wants to rig one of the Deadworld's moons as a kinetic weapon, basically turn it into the biggest bullet we've ever fired. Hyun-woo raised an eyebrow. "That's definitely insane. How long would it take?" 3 days. We'd need Quilnari ships to help position the charges. Do it. What about psychological warfare? Ara grinned. I've been working on that. Remember how we found out their communication is pheromone-based? Well, sound also disrupts their coordination. I've been going through our music library. Heavy percussion seems to work best. You want to blast death metal at alien bugs? I want to blast death metal at alien bugs while painting our ships with warning colors and broadcasting images that trigger prey fear responses. Make them afraid to get close. Hyun-woo laughed, which made several Quilnari officers on the bridge flinch. They still weren't used to human expressions. Sometimes I think we're the monsters in this story. Maybe, Ara agreed. But we're their monsters. That's what matters. The psychological warfare campaign began the next day. Mirai led a squadron of modified fighters painted in bright red and black patterns, Earth Predator colors. The ships broadcast thundering drum beats and screaming guitars across all frequencies. The effect on the swarm was immediate and visible. Their formations became ragged. Their attacks lost coordination. In the swarm overmind, confusion rippled through the neural network. The sounds disrupted pheromone sensing. The colors triggered ancient biological warnings coded into the swarm's genetic memory. These weren't the usual prey species that ran or hid. These were something else. Something dangerous. Do-hyun led another boarding action, this time targeting a swarm command ship. His Marines moved through the vessel with brutal efficiency. But this time something was different. The swarm drones hesitated before attacking. They pulled back instead of swarming forward. "They're scared," one Marine reported with surprise. "These things are actually scared of us." "Good," Do-hyun replied. "Fear makes mistakes. Keep moving." They reached the command ship's core where a massive creature served as the ship's central processor. It was 20 feet tall, all teeth and tentacles and biological weapons. It saw the humans and actually retreated. Do-hyun raised his weapon. "Sorry, big guy. Nothing personal. Just war." The explosion that followed destroyed the command ship's ability to coordinate its fleet. Dozens of swarm vessels suddenly operated without central guidance, their attacks becoming random and unfocused. Ara took advantage immediately, directing focused fire on the confused ships. Back on Velthar Prime, Elder Phylaxis watched the battle from the council tower. Scout Tarina stood beside him, her young eyes wide with wonder and fear. "They're winning," she whispered. "How are they winning?" Phylaxis had been studying human history files that Nari had shared with the Quilnari. He had read about Earth's wars, its diseases, its natural disasters. He had learned about extinction events that humanity survived through sheer stubbornness. He had seen images of predators on Earth that would terrify any sane species. "They're winning because they come from a world that gave them no choice but to be strong," he said quietly. "Every generation of humans fought to survive. They didn't evolve in gardens like us. They evolved in a nightmare world, and it made them into something terrifying. Are we wrong to accept their help? Tirina asked. They're so violent. So brutal. Phylaxis thought about his people hiding in shelters. He thought about the two dead worlds. They're violent on our behalf. That makes all the difference. On the Taejong, Hyunwoo received a report from Nari. She had successfully weaponized Earth bacteria into aerosol dispersal systems. Taemin had the delivery system ready. They could deploy it within 6 hours, but Hyunwoo hesitated. Once they used biological weapons, there was no going back. It crossed a line that many species would find unforgivable. Ara saw his hesitation. Captain, permission to speak freely? Always. We came here to help these people. We've lost good Marines doing it. If using bacteria from Earth saves Quilnari lives and ends this faster, then we use it. The moral weight is something we carry, not them. Hyunwoo looked at his second officer. And if the rest of the galaxy judges us for it? Then they can judge us while the Quilnari survive. Sir, we're humans. We do what needs to be done. That's who we are. Hyunwoo made his decision. Deploy the biological agent. Target the 3 largest hive ships. If this works, the rest of the fleet might break off. The deployment happened during the next engagement. Quilnari ships carrying Nari's bioweapon approached the hive ships under cover of human fighter screens. They released the aerosol into the ship's ventilation systems. Within minutes, chaos erupted. The bacteria spread through the hive ships like wildfire. They weren't deadly to the swarm, but they produced pheromones that contradicted every signal the swarm drones received. Attack and retreat orders mixed together. Friend or foe identifications scrambled. Inside the hive ships, swarm drones attacked each other in confusion. The 3 targeted hive ships tore themselves apart from the inside. No human weapons fired. No Quilnari lives lost. Just Earth bacteria doing what they did best, surviving and reproducing in new environments. In the swarm overmind, something fundamental shifted. For the first time in its long existence, the overmind experienced fear. Not the prey fear it fed upon, but real existential terror. These Earth creatures fought with weapons the swarm couldn't defend against. The memorial service took place in the Taejong's hangar bay, which had been cleared of fighters and equipment. 47 people gathered in silence. 23 humans, 24 Quilnari who insisted on attending. In the center of the bay stood a holographic display showing the faces of the fallen. 8 humans had died. 8 crew members who left Earth on an exploration mission and found themselves fighting an alien war. Hyunwoo stood before the display in his formal uniform. He looked older than he had a week ago. Tired. The weight of command showed in the lines around his eyes. Ensign Kyungmin was 20 years old. He began, his voice steady but soft. He joined the crew because he wanted to see the stars. He loved music and terrible jokes, and he could fix anything mechanical. 3 days ago, he held a corridor alone for 12 minutes while Quilnari civilians evacuated through an underground shelter. He saved 416 lives. He didn't make it out. Hyunwoo paused, his jaw tightening. Lieutenant Somin was our communications officer. She was 32. She had a daughter back on Earth. During the 3rd engagement, a swarm fighter breached our hull. Somin manually sealed the compartment from the inside. Knowing she'd be trapped, she bought us time to repair the damage. We recovered her body yesterday. One by one, Hyunwoo named them. Engineers who kept systems running while the ship fell apart around them. Marines who fought to their last breath. A medical officer who died treating wounded while the bay depressurized. Each name, each face, each story of sacrifice, the Quilnari listened in silence. Many were crying. They had never witnessed anything like this. The humans showed no shame in their grief. They wept openly while standing at attention. Ara's face was wet with tears, but her spine was straight and her eyes forward. Taemin held Nari's hand while both of them shook with suppressed sobs. When Hyunwoo finished, he stood silently for a long moment. Then he spoke again, his voice rough with emotion. We came to help strangers. Every person here knew the risks. Knew we might not go home. They chose to fight anyway because that's what we do. That's what humans do. We see someone in trouble and we don't look away. We don't calculate the odds. We just help. He looked up at the faces on the display. You saved a civilization. You're heroes. We'll make sure the galaxy never forgets your names. After the service, Phylaxis found Hyunwoo alone in the observation deck, staring out at the damaged Quilnari homeworld. The human captain didn't turn when the elder approached. I must write letters to their families, Hyunwoo said quietly. Tell parents their children died on a world they've never heard of. Tell a 4-year-old girl that her mother isn't coming home. How do I explain that their loved ones died for aliens they didn't know existed a week ago? Phylaxis had no answer. In his long life, he had never faced such responsibility. The Quilnari had no military tradition, no history of sacrifice for others. Your people grieve deeply, Phylaxis observed. I thought warriors would be harder, colder. Hyunwoo finally turned to face him. If we didn't grieve, we'd be monsters. Feeling the weight of loss is what keeps us human. The day we stop caring about the cost is the day we become the enemy. But you carry on, despite the pain, because if we don't, their sacrifice means nothing. We honor the dead by continuing the mission, by being worthy of what they gave us. Over the next day, Phylaxis watched the humans work through their grief. They didn't hide it, but they didn't let it stop them. Jisoo treated wounded with the same intensity, though her eyes were red from crying. Taemin repaired damaged systems while occasionally stopping to wipe his face. Dohyun trained his remaining Marines, pushing them harder, as if he could prevent more losses through sheer preparation. Ara especially fascinated Phylaxis. She had been caught in a decompression accident during the last major battle. The pressure differential should have killed her. Instead, she had sealed the breach, survived long enough for rescue, and spent 2 days in medical care. Now she was back on the bridge, her left arm in a support brace, working as if nothing had happened. How? Phylaxis asked her. The medical scans show massive trauma. You should be dead or at minimum recovering for weeks. Ara smiled tiredly. Human bodies are tough, Elder. We evolved to heal from injuries that would kill most species. Broken bones, torn muscles, even some organ damage. Our bodies patch themselves up if you give them time. It's one of Earth's gifts. You don't survive on a death world without being hard to kill. But Phylaxis also witnessed another side of humanity. He watched Nari spend hours each day with a young Quilnari scientist named Ilessa, teaching her about human biology and learning about Quilnari culture. They worked together to catalog and preserve samples of Quilnari plant and animal life, creating a genetic library in case the worst happened. Why do you care about our culture? Ilessa asked during one session. You're warriors, soldiers. Nari looked surprised by the question. We're scientists and explorers first. Soldiers only when we have to be. Just because we can fight doesn't mean that's all we are. Humanity has art, music, poetry, philosophy. We value culture and knowledge as much as strength, maybe more. Taemin worked alongside Quilnari engineers to rebuild damaged infrastructure. He taught them techniques for rapid repair and modular construction. He was patient and kind, showing none of the violence he displayed in battle. You're very different when you're not fighting, observed a Quilnari engineer. Taemin grinned. Fighting is what we do when everything else fails. Building is what we'd rather be doing. On Earth, we have a saying. We study war so that we might have peace. The goal isn't to be good at killing. It's to protect what we love. Dohyun's Marines took time to visit Quilnari schools and medical centers, bringing supplies and helping with reconstruction. Children who had been terrified of these tall predators now climbed on them like playground equipment. One Marine spent his off-duty time teaching Quilnari younglings basic self-defense, adapting techniques to their different body structure. Phylaxis observed all of this with growing understanding. These humans were capable of extraordinary violence, yes, but they were also capable of extraordinary gentleness. They could fight with savage intensity and then treat wounded enemies with compassion. They could destroy a hive ship and then spend hours reading stories to frighten children. One evening, Phylaxis sat with Hyunwoo in the council tower, looking out over the recovering city. I'm beginning to understand you, Phylaxis said. You're not monsters or machines. You're people who learn to do terrible things in service of good things. The violence is a tool, not your nature. We're capable of both, Hyunwoo admitted. Every human carries that balance. We can be incredibly cruel or incredibly kind. Most of us spend our lives trying to be the latter, while staying capable of the former. It's not easy. How do you carry this burden? The responsibility for so many lives? The weight of all this death? Hyunwoo was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because if we don't, who will? We've seen what happens when no one answers the call for help, when no one stands between the innocent and the monsters. That's not a galaxy we want to live in. But the cost, the pain, is worth it if we save people. Every time. That's the choice we make. We accept the burden so others don't have to. The next morning, new alerts sounded across the system. Long-range sensors detected something massive approaching. Hundreds of jump signatures. The swarm was returning and they were bringing their entire fleet. The command center erupted in panic. Quilnari officers shouted over each other, pulling up tactical displays that showed an overwhelming force. Over 300 swarm hive ships, thousands of fighters, enough biomass to consume a dozen worlds. Hyun-woo stood at the center of the chaos, perfectly calm. He studied the data for 60 seconds. Then he started giving orders. Ara, I need new tactical options. Taemin, how fast can you rig that moon weapon we discussed? Dohyun, prepare all Marines for ground defense. Nari, contact the Quilnari medical centers and get them ready for mass casualties. The crew moved immediately. No questions, no hesitation. Phylaxis watched in amazement as the humans transformed from grieving individuals into a coordinated fighting force in seconds. Captain, Phylaxis said urgently, there are too many. Even with all your tricks, even with your weapons, you can't fight that many. Hyun-woo looked at him, and in the human's eyes, Phylaxis saw something that both terrified and inspired him. Determination. Absolute, unshakable determination. Watch us, Hyun-woo said simply. Ara approached with a data tablet. Captain, I have an idea. It's insane. It's possibly suicidal, but it might work. That's my favorite kind of plan, Hyun-woo replied. Show me. As Ara explained her strategy, Phylaxis felt his hope and despair warring with each other. The humans were going to try something impossible. They were going to stand against an overwhelming force with nothing but courage and creativity. They were going to do it because a species they barely knew had asked for help. Phylaxis looked around the command center at these strange beings from a nightmare world. They were tired. They were wounded. They had already lost friends. But not one of them suggested running. Not one of them proposed surrender. Why? He asked Hyun-woo. Why do you keep fighting? You could leave. You've done more than anyone could expect. Why stay and face certain death? The swarm fleet emerged from jump space like a wave of darkness. 347 hive ships, thousands of fighter craft, enough biomass to consume everything living in the Velthar system twice over. The swarm overmind had learned from its previous encounters. It would not underestimate the Deathworlders again. On the bridge of the Taejong, Ara pulled up the final tactical display. Her plan was spread across multiple screens, and every Quilnari who looked at it felt their hope dying. It was complicated, brutal, and required perfect timing across a dozen different operations. One mistake would doom them all. The moon weapon needs 3 hours to reach firing position, Taemin reported from engineering. I've automated the sequence, but someone needs to be on site to manually trigger it. The radiation from the propulsion charges will kill anyone in the control room within 30 minutes. I'll do it, said Mirai immediately. Hyun-woo looked at his best pilot. She was young, barely 25, with her whole life ahead of her. Mirai, there's no survival window. If you go down there, you don't come back. I know, sir, but I'm the best pilot we have. I can navigate the debris field faster than anyone else, get the device in position and trigger it at the exact right moment. It needs to be me. Hyun-woo wanted to argue, wanted to order someone else, wanted to find any other option. But he had learned long ago that sometimes command meant accepting sacrifices you couldn't prevent. He nodded slowly. Make it count, he said, his voice rough. Mirai smiled, and it was bright and brave and broke his heart. Always do, Captain. The plan was simple in concept, impossible in execution. They would use the destroyed second world as a weapon. Taemin had rigged its smaller moon with massive propulsion charges. When detonated, the moon would accelerate directly into the swarm fleet. The gravitational disruption would trap the hive ships in place, unable to jump away. But the Taejong had to hold position at the edge of the gravity well to ensure the Quilnari homeworld wasn't caught in the blast. That meant sitting in the swarm's firing range for over an hour. That meant taking every hit the swarm could throw at them. Are you insane? Commander Brightalk asked when he heard the plan. Your ship will be torn apart, Ara shrugged. Probably. But if we move, the calculations fail and Velthar Prime gets pulled in, so we don't move. On the ground, Dohyun positioned his Marines across the Quilnari capital city. The swarm would deploy ground forces to overwhelm defenses while their fleet engaged the Taejong. It was standard swarm tactics, but Dohyun had a surprise prepared. Remember, he told his Marines over the tactical channel, we're not trying to win on the ground. We're buying time. Every minute we hold is 1 minute closer to the moon weapon firing. I don't care if you're injured, out of ammo, or surrounded. You hold your position until relieved. Understood? Sir, yes, sir, came the response from 23 voices. 23 Marines against what would likely be thousands of swarm ground troops. The battle began when the swarm fleet advanced on the Taizhong. They didn't send fighters first this time. They didn't probe defenses. They simply opened fire with everything they had. Hundreds of biological weapons, acid spitters, and kinetic projectiles converged on the single human ship. The Taizhong shook like it was coming apart. Hull breaches appeared on 3 decks. Power fluctuated. Systems failed and were brought back online by Taemin's engineering teams working miracles. But the ship held position exactly where Ara needed it. Shields at 40%, called a systems officer. Reroute power from non-essential systems, Ara ordered. Life support to minimum. Gravity to 0 in all compartments except command and engineering. Give me everything for shields and weapons. The crew worked in 0 gravity as the ship bucked around them. They strapped themselves to stations and kept working. Hyunwoo watched his people perform under impossible conditions and felt pride mixing with grief. Some of them wouldn't survive this. Below, the first swarm drop pods hit the Quilnari capital. Thousands of drones poured out, chittering and screaming, their biological weapons primed. They flowed through streets like a flood of teeth and claws. Then they hit Do-hyun's defensive line. The humans had prepared the urban environment. Buildings rigged with explosives. Streets turned into kill zones. Automated weapons at every corner. And in the center, Marines who had trained for urban combat their entire careers. The swarm drones crashed into prepared positions and died by the hundreds. Human weapons fire cut through their ranks with mechanical precision. Drones that made it through the kill zones found Marines fighting hand-to-hand, using combat techniques developed over thousands of years of human warfare. A swarm warrior tackled Marine Jongsu, its mandibles aiming for his throat. He caught it, twisted, and broke its back with his bare hands. Another Marine ran out of ammunition and switched to a combat knife, fighting with cold efficiency. They didn't retreat. They didn't break. They held every meter of ground like it was sacred. The Quilnari civilian defense forces fought beside them, inspired by human courage. They weren't warriors, but they had learned in the past week that sometimes ordinary people had to do extraordinary things. They held their ground, too. In space, Mirai flew her interceptor through the debris field toward the modified moon. Swarm fighters pursued her, but she danced between chunks of dead planet with skill that bordered on supernatural. She corkscrewed through a gap barely wider than her ship, rolled inverted, and fired backward at her pursuers without breaking acceleration. Mirai, status? Hyunwoo's voice crackled through heavy interference. 2 minutes to target, Captain. I've got company, but nothing I can't handle. Another roll, another impossible maneuver. One pursuer crashed into debris. Another took a return fire and exploded. On the Taejong, damage reports scrolled faster than anyone could read them. The shields were at 15%. Hull breaches on 7 decks. Casualties mounting. But they held position. Captain, we can't take much more, Ara said quietly. Her tactical board showed red across most systems. How long until the moon is in position? 43 minutes. Hyunwoo looked around his bridge. His crew was exhausted, wounded, pushed beyond any reasonable limit. He thought about the 8 already dead. He thought about how many more might join them. We hold, he said simply. Mirai reached the moon's control center. The entire surface was bathed in radiation from the propulsion charges. Her ship's sensors screamed warnings. She ignored them, brought her craft down in a landing that would have earned her a reprimand under normal circumstances, and ran for the control bunker. Inside, she began the final activation sequence. Her hands flew over controls while radiation alarms blared. She could feel the heat through her suit, feel her body starting to shut down, but the sequence needed 60 seconds to complete. She would give it 60 seconds. Moon weapon is activating, she reported, her voice already weakening. 30 seconds to minimum safe distance. Captain, it's been an honor. The honor was ours, Mirai, Hyunwoo replied. Fly high, always do, sir. Always do. Mirai slumped over the controls as the radiation overwhelmed her. But the sequence completed. The propulsion charges fired. The moon began accelerating toward the swarm fleet at impossible velocity. On the ground, Do-hyun's Marines were being overwhelmed. They had held for 40 minutes against impossible odds, but the swarm just kept coming. Marine Haejin was down, injured but still firing from a sitting position. Marine Yunji fought with a broken arm. Marine Jiangsu was covered in his own blood but refused to leave his post. All units collapsed to secondary positions, Do Hyun ordered. Fighting retreat. Make them pay for every meter. The Marines fell back, covering each other, still fighting. The Kilnari defense forces retreated with them, protecting civilians. They were losing ground, but they were buying time. On the Taijong, shields failed completely. Direct hits punched through hull plating. Sections depressurized. Jisoo worked in medical, treating casualties as fast as they arrived, her face set in grim determination. Taemin rerouted power through damaged conduits, keeping systems running through sheer willpower. Ara monitored the moon's trajectory on her tactical display. 20 seconds until impact, 15:10. All ships brace for gravitational anomaly. She broadcast on all frequencies. The moon hit the center of the swarm fleet at a significant fraction of light speed. The kinetic energy released was beyond calculation. Hive ships simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the impact. The shockwave tore through the fleet like paper. The gravitational well formed exactly as Taemin had calculated, trapping every swarm vessel in an inescapable grip. Ships that tried to jump away were torn apart by gravitational shear. Those that tried to flee were pulled back. The swarm overmind's last coherent thought was something like horror, as it realized the Deathworlders had turned physics itself into a weapon. The Taijong, positioned at the exact edge of the gravity well, shook violently but held. Hyunwoo gripped his command chair as his ship screamed in protest. Warning lights flashed across every system. But they held position. The Quilnari homeworld remained untouched. When the chaos finally cleared, the swarm fleet was gone. Over 300 hive ships destroyed, thousands of fighters crushed, the most dangerous threat the sector had ever known, eliminated in a single devastating blow.